Well, as we conclude training camp in the terms of what ends before the first game of the preseason begins, Shane Steichen has let Colts fans know and the media know what his plans are for the starters ahead of week 1 of preseason. What's going on? It's Elijah from Sports Talk Indy, where we cover all things Colts every single day. And we look ahead to the first game of the preseason. And while a lot of teams are resting their starters, Shane Steichen is going for an opposite approach, which I think is the right approach, and that is that he is pushing all of his starters except for, in his words, maybe one or two, which is good because we have a quarterback who has finished one NFL game and has been injured in 4 of the 5 that he tried to start. This is good news for the Colts fans. It's probably only going to be a couple of drives and maybe a quarter, but it's going to give some real experience to players like Anthony Richardson. But not only that, but in the absence of Josh Downs, it's going to give some real experience to wide receivers 2 and 3, which is at the moment Alec Pierce and Josh Downs. But the other thing it's going to give us is it's going to give us a really good idea of what the Broncos quarterback situation is going to look like from a Broncos perspective. But it's also going to show us a lot on the defensive side. What is it going to look like with this free safety? Right now, Julian Blackman has switched to free safety. Rodney Harrison Jr. is now the strong safety. There's a lot of unknowns here. And while all of that is circling, the Colts have still not made a veteran defensive back signing, which again, to the frustration of many media members, fans, and it seems like even potentially some Colts players, with some cryptic tweets coming from players like Kenny Moore and Zaire Franklin, leading to us to believe that they want help as well. Um, Yesterday in training camp, in the last 11 on 11, before the preseason game tomorrow on Sunday, Anthony Richardson went 9 for 11 with 3 touchdowns, one to Adonai Mitchell, one to Michael Pittman, and then one to Trey Sermon. It definitely seems as though either Anthony Richardson is on like God mode, or this Colts defense is really, really struggling against a guy who's even inexperienced like Anthony Richardson. So that's the biggest question that we have. But the starting lineups for the Indianapolis Colts will get playing time during preseason opener against the Denver Broncos. Going on to this report, Shane Steichen said that the starting units will play a series or two during the opener. He mentioned a few starters will rest, and Sage can confirm that Anthony Richardson will play. So this is good. This is exactly what we were just talking about, and I also think it's going to be good for us to get an idea because there's another competition going on, and while it's not getting the same headlines that the free safety or the wide receiver 2 positions getting, it's definitely still important, and that is who is quarterback 3, because there's a competition there, whether or not it seems as so. But you have Sam Ellinger, who's on the last year of his contract, quarterback out of Texas. He had the starting opportunity a couple of times, and then during that terrible season that we all try and forget. But you've also got quarterback wide receiver Jason Bean coming from Kansas. And while Jason Bean might not draw a lot of headlines, it definitely seems as though he's got some potential for some really good plays. He's not the only wide receiver like in this kind of stature that switched. You got guys like Julian Edelman. You've got guys from all the way around that have made the switch from quarterback to wide receiver. Jason Bean's got speed and he's got experience, and he'd be fun to watch and see if he's got the potential to be quarterback 3. But there's also another one in Kedon Slovis. And Slovis played, um, I mean, all 4 years. Definitely looks like a good potential backup quarterback because Flacco's on a 1 year deal. He's on an emergency deal, basically. If Anthony Richardson gets hurt again, we have a guy that can come in and take us and without dropping too much. I mean, I do think that the conditioning between Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco is a quite large gap, but it's similar to that to Gardner Minshew. But also, you've got to look ahead to the future. A quarterback 2 is a guy who's on the team for a long time. Typically, it's a guy who knows the system, sometimes even better, and for longer than some of your starting quarterbacks. I remember Jim Sorgi back in the days of Peyton Manning being the constant backup quarterback, and it's just something that's always been there. So I think that it's important for this in this preseason. We're going to get a really good idea of what this looks like for the quarterback 3 position. But there's 5 players that we want to highlight in this preseason, specifically in the preseason opener. The first one is the most exciting one, and that's Leatu Latu. Leatu Latu has like shown out in training camp so far this season. and is already putting guys that some elite offensive linemen on their backs. And really already breaking ankles, which is really encouraging to see. That's what we've wanted. We've wanted a dominant pass rusher, whether or not I knew it, because I was definitely rooting for defensive back or wide receiver in round one. Happy with who they got. But Leatu Latu is going to show out against this Broncos offensive line, and it's going to be really exciting, especially going against Jarrett Stidham, who is their current QB1, Bo Nix being their QB3. So Leatu Latu is one that we definitely want to watch and see just what is he going to be able to do. What is the potential of Leatu Latu? We'll all eyes will be on him. The next one is defensive tackle Taven Bryan. And Brian, we haven't heard much since training camp, but when Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer was visiting Colts training camp, he dropped a noteworthy nugget of information in his takeaway article, calling Brian a camp surprise. While the front end defensive depth chart is set with DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, and Roquan Davis, the fourth spot in that rotation is up for grabs, and Brian should see plenty of snaps against Denver. This is a place where the Colts have significant amount of depth. But it's definitely one that a guy like Brian could have potential to really, really show up and show out. And I think that Brian's going to be an exciting watch. He might not get the same attention and uh, the same, you know, he doesn't have, I think, the capabilities of being Grover Stewart or DeForest Buckner right now. But as we look ahead to the future, Taven Bryan might be a good pick, and even potentially he could be good for a trade package, depending. The next one is cornerback Jalen Jones, and we've talked about Jones a lot. Jones did not have a good training camp in the metric of it seemed as though he was really, really struggling to read wide receivers. He was falling behind a little bit. And we know that Kenny Moore will be the nicker cornerback, and Juju Brents appears to be locked in one of the starting boundary positions, but the spot opposite of him is the bigger potential battles taking place so far. Jalen Jones has taken the majority of those starting snaps over Dallas Flowers, although, from the sounds of it, Jones is still experiencing the inconsistencies that many young players face. Is Jones able to further separate himself from Flowers on Sunday? I personally really love Dallas Flowers. I think Dallas Flowers, in the short little window of time that we got to see him last year, we really got to see what he was able to do. And the last one that we're going to talk about today is safety Nick Cross. I've been a Nick Cross fan for 2 years now. I loved the pick out of Maryland. I think he's been one that really has potential to be great. Um, but we have to see, what is he going to be able to do in the free safety position? He's very fast and still very young, only 22 or 23 years old at the start of the season. So when we look to this free safety position, it's either going to be a guy who's going to be like a blockbuster signing like Justin Simmons, or we're going to have to put all our faith in a guy like Nick Cross. And personally, I think Nick Cross has the capabilities to be that guy, but we'll see. We don't know. We don't know what that's going to look like for him. But those are the things, the takeaways we have before the preseason opener, and we will make a video as soon as the game is done on our takeaways from the first game of the preseason. So be sure to stick around, subscribe, and like this, turn on notification bell so you can be up to date on all things Colts news this season.